Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Lyoto Machida to defeat John Jones. And I'm here to talk about Themba Gorimbo versus Pete Rodriguez. Rodriguez is 5-1 as a pro, 27 years old, and he's given up 4 inches of height and 4 inches of reach to 33-year-old Gorimbo, who is 11-4 as a pro. This is a fight between one guy that I barely trust and another guy whom I do not trust. He hasn't given me any reason to trust him. The guy I barely trust is Themba Gorimbo. And I trust him because he seems to be, at least, he's fought some real fighters. And he actually has a well rounded game. I trust him a lot more on the ground than I do Pete Rodriguez. Gorimbo, he's got 11 wins, 1 via TKO, 6 via submission, 4 via decision. He's a very competent ground fighter. I think if he gets on the ground against Pete Rodriguez on top or even on the bottom, I'd favor him to win via submission. Certainly if he's on top. But he's got a good guard, got a good triangle choke, and he's shown a lot, whereas Pete Rodriguez has shown nothing. So I think Themba Gorimbo, even if he's fallen in love with his hands after that knockdown over Takashi Sato, I would hope he's looking to play the role of the grappler in this fight because it is his primary path to victory. And on the feet, despite the recent success, he's vulnerable and he hasn't shown much offensively or defensively. I've got doubts about him. Offensively, he throws or has thrown typically weaker, looping arm punches. He's sloppy on the feet, although he will have 4 inches of height and reach, which will help him picking his shots on the outside, I suppose. But I still think he's up against it if he's striking with Pete Rodriguez. Pete Rodriguez, I think, will reach him quickly. I think Pete Rodriguez has better technique. Despite the height and the reach, his hands are much sharper, and certainly he's got power on his side. Themba Gorimbo does not have the power that it looks like he should have. He's just got some awkward striking and a potentially vulnerable chin. Gorimbo, he's only been knocked out once. Dave Mazzani knocked him out. That was on the regional scene. Round two, he was doing well in round one. Gorimbo was pouring it on Mazzani. But then in round two, got caught with a big punch and sat on his ass and pounded out. Uh, and his other loss to AJ Fletcher, it was ultimately a guillotine choke in round two, but he got knocked into the guillotine choke in round two. His chin was responsible largely for that loss. And I should mention he has another loss also via guillotine in round two to this really good fighter, or decent fighter, Leon Minhart, who beat Don Madge 3 times. But so there might be a little submission weakness as well, even though he was knocked halfway out in one of those submission losses. But regardless of the case, submission isn't on the table here for Pete Rodriguez in this fight. So I think Gorimbo can relax there. And his one decision loss he has was to this guy, Henderson Fajeda, who's definitely a violent striker. And Henderson was out grappling him, got top control all 3 rounds, stuffed the guard at Themba Gorimbo, and Gorimbo didn't have an answer for him. Also, it's important to mention that I haven't seen the fights, but Gorimbo was TKO'd once as an amateur. It was in round 3, and he was also tapped 2 more times. But again, he could have been tapped 50 times. I still wouldn't put submission on the table for this fight, not when he's fighting Pete Rodriguez. Of course, submission victory is very much on the table for Gorimbo. I think if he's able to get Pete Rodriguez to the ground, he's going to dominate him and submit him. Pete Rodriguez is a very one-dimensional fighter, on paper anyway. I mean, there's a chance he's like Jacare on the ground, but I don't think so. He's got 5 wins as a pro, all via knockout or TKO. In fact, he's got like 7 amateur wins or whatever, and all those are via knockout or TKO. He's got really good hands. I think he's definitely got a power advantage in this fight, and he's also got a speed advantage, despite being shorter and smaller, at least hand speed anyway. Gorimbo, I expect to move better. But Pete Rodriguez, I really liked what I seen from him on the feet, despite him not beating anybody of note. I mean, his best victory is over Mike Jackson, the guy that beat CM Punk. Mike Jackson, the second worst fighter in modern UFC history. And that's his best win, although to his credit, he did what he was supposed to do, and he steamrolled Mike Jackson and actually knocked him dead with a beautiful knee, where I don't even know if he got a post-fight bonus for that or whatever, but it was an awesome victory, despite it being the worst possible opponent to beat in the UFC. But those are his high-profile fights. Mike Jackson, his best victory, and Jack Della Maddalena, his one professional loss. That's a pretty big gap there. Jack Della Maddalena is fighting for a title shot, maybe. He's fighting Gilbert Burns in his next fight. The guy's already at the top of the division. And even when he fought Pete Rodriguez, whatever that was, 2 years ago, he had everybody's respect, and it was just a mismatch on paper. But still, I like the way Pete looked in that fight for like 30 seconds or a minute or something. I thought he fared pretty damn well with his hands. Was giving Jack fits for 15 seconds. No, but I'm assuming Jack Della Maddalena was making reads, and when he turned it around, it was his fight. He really started beating down Pete Rodriguez, and he got it done inside a round. But Pete showed some good hands there anyway. Uh, as far as his losses go, that's his one professional loss. He's got two other losses as an amateur. One loss was via rear naked choke in 2 minutes. I haven't seen it, but I can imagine how it went down. I tried to see it. And another one was a decision. And that was a decision that he lost on the ground to a guy that looked like he had my physique and was probably even older than I am. But Pete looked good. He was a kid, 19 years old, had great hands even then. But he was taken down every round. And when he was taken down, the guy was advancing on him, mounting, back mount. And Pete did not have an answer. That fight was 8 years ago. So I don't want to harp on it, but I'm grasping at straws here, looking for any sort of evidence of Pete Rodriguez grappling. So I had to look to that. As far as his offense goes, he took one guy down as an amateur and mounted him, TKO'd him. And another guy, I saw him take down and he won a round, I think as an amateur, a 3-minute round. But generally, he is not looking to take the fight to the ground, and he is not skilled on the ground. If he was, I think it would have shown itself in some of his other victories, all of which are dominant. But he's fighting low-level guys, and they never get past level one with him, which is, him TKOing them. So I think Pete, he's really up against the whole UFC roster until I see what he can do, defending takedowns or defending submissions and grappling. But I don't expect him to fare well on the ground with anybody in the UFC, unless it's a very specific matchup, which I can't even fathom. But on the feet, I think he's got an advantage over Gorimbo. I already expressed my doubts in Themba Gorimbo. Pete Rodriguez has really good hands, really sharp, knocking guys out. I think with both hands, I've seen it. He's got power, and he's got some really sharp striking. And I think if he's able to strike his way into hook range, he could test that chin of Themba Gorimbo. So if I was to play anything for this fight, it'd be Pete Rodriguez, and it'd be specifically Pete Rodriguez via knockout, because that is his only path to victory, historically on paper, and also whatever, theoretically or something. I don't know. But I think if he does win, it's by knockout, but it's not my prediction. I've got Themba Gorimbo winning by submission. There's just, that's the biggest gap in this fight. I do think Pete could handle him on the feet, but I know Themba could handle him on the ground. And altogether, I'm expecting Themba Gorimbo to be able to put it there. Gorimbo wins via submission. Call it round 2, maybe deep round 1. But I'd like to learn more about Pete Rodriguez in this fight. And you know what? I get drunk enough, I might bet on Pete Rodriguez via knockout. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.